Alright, so I know some of you have probably been wanting to see how some texturing is done. I've been pretty busy, so I haven't been able to make a texturing tutorial yet. Um, so I'm working on a project creating like a low poly sort of village, medieval village kind of a thing. Um, so I'm not going to, obviously walk you through all of that, but I will show you this bridge that I'm working on. I'm going to show you basically just my process for how to go about taking it from a low poly model to a finished, ready to render kind of a thing. Um, I'm not going to show you how to model it. I think that you can handle modeling a simple bridge like this if you're ready for texturing. But basically, I'm going to be using 3 or 4 softwares. I'm going to use Maya, obviously. You could use whatever modeling software suits your needs. I'm going to be using another software called UV Layout. You can just search UV Layout. I'll probably include a link in the video comments or whatever. And that's a really good software for just doing UV mapping, because Maya's UV mapping is a little weak in my opinion. I mean, I don't use it all the time. I'm sure you can do some decent UV mapping with it, but for more detailed objects, I like to do it in the UV layout program. And then I'll probably be doing the actual texture painting within Mudbox and Photoshop. So this is the model that I'm going to be working with. This is my bridge model. It's, it's real low poly. There's, what, 218 polys, so I've removed the bottom here because that's going to be going into the ground for sure. So if you're not going to see it, then you don't need it. So to get started, I just want to select this, and I'm going to export it as an OBJ, an object. So I've already done that, but you can go ahead and do that. And I want to change this real quick, because I don't think this is right. Oops. I just want to bring that in a little bit, make it a little softer. So there's that. Okay. So actually, I will go ahead and export this now. Export selection. Maybe I didn't export it yet. Anyway, I'm going to call it Bridge 01 in case I make a second one. And I'm just going to export that. When I go to my scenes, I'm going to grab that Bridge 01 OBJ and I'm going to drop it onto the UV layout icon. So when we're opening it, you're going to get something like this. You'll probably have less of these if you're using the trial UV layout version, which is plenty fine. I'm not going to use any of the advanced features, so you'll be able to do this with just the trial version of UV layout. So the load options are here essentially. You have, the type, sub-D, poly. You can edit the UVs if you already have some on there and you want to just edit them in UV layout. Or you can do new. There's a few things down here like weld UVs, clean, detach. We're not going to worry about any of that. I don't need to worry about any of that. You just want poly and new. And we'll just hit load, and it's going to bring up the model in this 3D window here. I'm not going to talk too much about how to use this software. On their website they have video tutorials that will show you all the basics that you need to know. but I will talk about it a little bit. There's 3 different views. You start out by default in view 2, which is the 3D edit mode, and you can switch between the different views by just using the number keys 1, 2, and 3. So if I press 1, I can't press 1 right now because I haven't laid anything out yet, but 1 would take me to my UV layout, 2 takes me to this edit mode, and then 3 is a preview of the 3D model that will just show you like the seams and any kind of distortion or whatever in the UVs after they've been laid out. So right now there's nothing laid out, so it's just white. So I've gone back to my edit mode, and I'm going to start essentially by just assessing the model and deciding how I want to break it down. You want to, when you're UV mapping, to try and keep seams to a minimum, and you want to just kind of imagine the shape as if you were going to be making it out of paper or something. Like, where would the folds be? Where would the glue have to go? So you see here, I have a sort of like a little lip there, and we don't want that laying out right across itself. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this bottom section out. This bridge is going to be stone. So what I'm doing is I'm holding my mouse over the edge and I'm just pressing C for cut, which is pretty logical. Okay, so C will cut and W will uncut, essentially. So I'm just going to go here. And red, it means that I have told that specific thing to be cut, whereas the yellow is sort of an extension of that it just does automatically to kind of help you get it done quicker. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut, I'm doing this side, and I'm going to flip it over and do the other side to match, so it's just, and if you were using like one of the more advanced versions, like the Pro version, there's symmetry options and stuff like that. My model doesn't have an edge down the center, so it probably wouldn't really matter anyway. But once I've made these cuts, they're not actually finalized. So what I want to do is I want to hit Enter while hovering over the model, and what I get is a piece that should break off. But I apparently have missed an edge somewhere because it's not separating. So I just need to review along the edge here and see what I didn't cut. Got it here. I don't see what I missed yet. It sucks when you miss an edge, because sometimes they can be pretty difficult to find. That doesn't look correct. Okay, so you see how there's this inside piece here. That's something that I messed up. I have some kind of like non-manifold geometry here where it shouldn't be there. So this is something that I would probably want to delete off of my model. But I can do that later as long as it still cuts correctly. Yeah, I have like an internal 2 faces there. I'm not sure why it's there, but I just made a mistake when modeling. So we'll just go ahead and cut that. And it's probably on the other side as well, so I'm going to go ahead and get in there and try and cut that out too. So I'm just hitting W on that edge that I need to cut, and then it's extending up this way, so I'm just going to press W up there, and it'll keep my red one, and there we go. So that was a little bit of a pain in the butt. That's why you want to have, you know, clean geometry, but that's okay. We've got it separated. And by holding space and middle mouse, I'm able to just kind of drag this away from the other object. So now I'm going to hover my mouse over it, and I'm going to press D. And D is for drop. So now I have dropped it to my UV layout mode. So if I press 1, I can come in here, and you see my box. This is my UV area, you know, my 0 to 1 UV. If you don't know like how UVs work and all that, you know, there's plenty of material that can explain how UVs function and all that. But essentially, this is the box where all your UVs want to end up laid out, flattened, when the end product is ready to go. So here's my unflattened bottom piece to my bridge. I'm going to go ahead and flatten that. There's a couple ways to do this. You can either just hover over it and hold F, and as I held F, it flattened it out. You can also do Shift F, which will stretch it out into like, you know, it'll grab all the edges and pull them apart, and then it'll flatten it out, which can be good with certain tricky objects and stuff like that. This particular one worked well just with the regular flatten, so I'm going to leave it as it is. You can see how it's mostly green. Green is good. That's what you want. That means there's no distortion really. Red, I believe, is I want to say red is compression, whereas blue would be like stretch. So if it was stretched out, it would be blue. See if I pull this edge here, and I'm doing that by holding Control and middle mouse button, just dragging that little edge. But if I were to do that, you know, as it stretches out, it will turn blue. That's just so that you're aware of the level of distortion in that area. In reality, I shouldn't have this little crease here, so I could either, you know, kind of overlap it and put it together, or I can just kind of like suck it up and deal with it. It's on the bottom of the thing, and I don't think it's going to be an issue for this particular model, so I'm not going to worry about it. If it ends up being a problem, I'll fix it like in post. But anyway, usually I don't worry about laying these things out in their final position yet. I like to get everything flattened first. So I'm just going to put that there and go back to my edit mode. So I press 2, and I'm back to my edit mode, and I have to cut apart the rest of this. So I kind of want to think about like how am I going to end up texturing this as well? Like, I know it's going to be a stone bridge, but the walking surface is probably going to be different than, you know, the side wall parts. So I might want to make that easier on myself. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut from here, and I'm going to go around this. Oops, popped out of my layout for a second. And I'll cut down here. Okay. Enter. And so there's that wall piece is kind of cut off. And I'm going to cut off the other side as well. Alright, so now I have my sort of walking area cut away from the rest of it. And you see here how I have these edges are not cut. That's going to end up causing distortion because it's not going to be able to flatten out, you know, in a completely reasonable manner. So I'm just going to make two little cuts on each end. One there and one there. Here and here. Enter. Okay, and now I can drop this center shape. And if I go into my UV edit, and I hold F, and I just keep holding it until I get, you know, it kind of stops moving and, you know, there's no real visible compression. If you have a problem where, like, it doesn't flatten out good, or you need to do it again, you can hold Shift and hit D, and that will sort of unflatten it, undrop it. Like, I just undropped it. I sent it back to the other edit menu. So I can come back in here, and Shift D from here would remove the cuts. But I don't want to do that, of course. So I just redrop it, and see, if I hit Shift F, it stretches it out like this, and then I can hit space, and it'll flatten from that pulled out state. And you can see with this particular object, there's not a lot of geometry, so it's not really a big issue. Sometimes it's easier to just do the regular flatten so that it doesn't get any twist in there. You can just do all this positioning stuff by just holding space and like moving around is middle mouse, rotating is your left mouse, and then scale would be right mouse. So I don't want to scale anything yet, even though you see how it's leaving the box area. It's clearly going to be too big. I like to scale everything at the end so that it's all evenly scaled and there's not any actual distortion from one object to the next. Whereas, like, if I scaled this and didn't scale this, now this is out of proportion to this, texture-wise. And it's going to stretch out the texture and it's not going to look as good. Now you might want to do that on purpose if certain areas are more important, you know, like if you're doing a character model, you want the face to be pretty much the highest resolution. So I need to cut this as well. I'm gonna try doing it this way because I think that will work. And if it doesn't, then I'll just try something else. You know, sometimes you just gotta trial and error with some of this stuff to get it to work. So there's that. I think it's all good. Oh, wait. Get that right there. Okay. It's always good to just kind of check it before you do a cut. Okay. Drop that. Drop that. So now there's nothing left for us in edit mode, so it has snapped us to our preview in our number 3 mode. And you can see the green areas, those are the flattened ones. They don't really have much distortion in them. See a little distortion there. Like I said, I don't think that's going to be an issue in the end result of this model. If it ends up being a problem, I'll take care of it then. Just get a sip of coffee. Okay, so here we have those two edges unflattened. I'm gonna press F and just kind of flatten it out. Okay, F, flatten. You can't always avoid all distortion. You know, clearly there's some distortion here, and if you have, you know, a significant amount of distortion, you may want to remove that by creating more cuts to kind of remove that pressure. In this particular case, though, there's not enough distortion, and the distortion isn't in an area where it's going to be highly noticeable. This is the top part where it kind of like bevels a little bit around that guardrail area, and the distortion isn't very bad. You can see it here. It's not real serious, and with proper texturing, it's not going to be noticed. We're not going to notice that at all. That can, you know, the distortion isn't always such a problem if you know, texture a certain way. Like if you're painting textures in Mudbox, it's a lot easier to get them to all look even. So now I have to figure out how I'm going to lay this stuff out in here to get it all to fit. Because you want to kind of maximize that texture space that you have. So I've just shrunk everything down all together. So that I can get everything in here. And like, see, this is like that road part. You might want to keep that straight if you're planning on doing this like in Photoshop. It can be a pain in the butt to try and get, you know, like if it was a cobblestone road or something, that texture, you wouldn't want it to be diagonal. You'd want it to go straight down the road. So that's something to consider when you're doing this kind of stuff. So you can see I'm just kind of trying to find something that sort of optimizes the space. And I know that this is the bottom of the bridge, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go ahead and shrink it down a little bit. Because it's not going to be a highly visible area. You know, I'm not planning on having the camera go under the bridge. So it's just a less important area, and so it doesn't require as much texture space. I could maybe scale it up a little bit and put it in here. get some overlap here. That's the main thing that you need to watch out for, is just you don't want overlap. Because then when you paint one thing, you end up with textures on two things, and that's not good. So this might not be the most optimal. I could cut these down into smaller pieces, and then I could lay them out, more efficiently to optimize this unused area. But this is going to work fine for our purposes. So, you can review it here. It's all red, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this is distorted relative to the rest of it. The darker red areas are a little bit more compressed, but essentially we scaled everything down, and so that created what the program thinks as compression. So now we can go ahead and save, and I'm just going to call this bridge01 underscore UV'd, so that I know that's the UV'd version. I don't like to save over older versions if I don't have to. So I'm going to save that, dismiss this, get out of here, close out UV layout. Now, within our actual Maya software, this is still the un-UV mapped version. So I'm going to just delete that, and I can import my new bridge 01 UV'd in the same spot. You can see there's a little bit more of a faceted feel to this. That's just the way the edges are, the normals have kind of become like hardened to the normal angle. So you can fix that by just going into your polygons, normals, and you can set the normal angle. 45 might do it, let's see. 45 looks okay in this case. Usually like 45, 42, something like that will work pretty good. It doesn't look weird. And if we look in our UV texture editor, you can now see our UV layout. Now, if you want to do this painting, like if you want to paint your textures in Photoshop, you can come into here, your UV texture editor, which you can get to through this panels option. You just go to panels, panel, UV texture editor right here. Okay, and that'll open it up in one of these windows. Or you can also go up top here, window, and let's see, which one is it under? I don't ever get at it from up here, so I'm looking for it. Oh, here it is. It's down here. UV texture editor. That'll bring it up in its own little pop-out window, which can be nice. So now we need to save this actual map here so that we can use it as a guide. We need a guide so that we know what we're painting. If you just paint this all willy-nilly, it's going to be all over the place. It's not going to look good. So you can go to polygons here, UV snapshot. Okay, here we have a few options to look at. Essentially, this is just going to be where you save it to. By default, it likes to go to your project images folder. I prefer it to go to the source images folder, so sometimes I go in there, and I would just call this like bridge 01, keeping the same kind of naming convention, and then underscore, and then I would call this maybe like UV map, so that I know that's the map, as opposed to like a diffuse or a color or something like that. So I'm just going to hit save. Then I have size X and size Y. Generally you want to keep this square because your you know, your UV is laid out square. You can go 512, 1024, 2048. These are pretty standard sizes. 2048 is generally the highest that for most applications you'll go, but you could go higher. You could go to like 4096 by 4096. But this is just the pixel dimensions of how big your map is. I'm going to go with the 2048. I think that will be fine. You can choose your image format. I like to do PNG because it's transparent by default when you open it up in Photoshop, and you'll see why that's useful in a moment. You can anti-alias, that's fine. Keep aspect ratios for up there. Color value, this is what color the little lines are going to be in your saved out map. White is fine. Do black, you can do whatever you want. I'm just going to leave it at white. I like white. So I hit OK. I'm not going to worry about any of this stuff right here. Normal, 0 to 1, that's what we want. So just hit OK. And it's saved to the file. If I go in my source images, you'll see I have some other textures here. So that was bridge 01. So right here. And I can open this up in Photoshop. Okay, so you can't really see it, but it's there. First thing I like to do is create a new layer. I put that on the bottom, and I fill it in with whatever my base color is going to be for this texture map. In this case, maybe it's gray because, you know, stone is gray, it's going to be a stone bridge. So there's gray. Then I go to my top layer with this UV map on there and change it to a multiply. And that's just going to make it so that it's easier to see. Unless you're working on a black background, then it's no good. You'll have to change it to something else. So we can see our UV map here. You know, you can zoom in, do whatever you want to do. We've got the base layer, and then from here I generally will start making new layers on top. So, like let's say I want this walking surface to be bright pink. I don't, but I'm just showing this as an example. I'm going to do my painting in Mudbox. So I'll show you guys that after this, but you know, maybe I want a bright pink walkway. So I'm just going to do this. And it's important to know like which piece is which when you're doing this, because if you don't know where you laid stuff out, you're not going to know what you're painting. Okay, so there's that. This tool over here, the polygonal lasso tool, is really useful when you're doing this kind of stuff, because see how I'm getting a little bit of this edge here? I don't want that, so it's good to come in and select, you know, that area and just delete it. Okay. Then like maybe I want the bottom of the bridge to be, I don't know, blue. If I use a harder brush, I can maybe avoid getting it on the other stuff. I'm just using a mouse. If you have like a tablet, this might work better for you. You know, you might have an easier time of it. I'm just used to using my mouse. Just gonna hit this eraser a little bit. So there's that. You know, again, I've got it kind of on the other surface over here. And you can add in, you know, details just like you would on any kind of Photoshop document here. Noise is always good, so like I would want to add noise, like Gaussian, monochromatic. There's a little bit of noise in there now. I've got my filter gallery, and I can do different stuff. You know, just do whatever kind of texture it is that you need to make. You can do that. You know, do that in here. I'm not gonna do these, so it would just be like a waste of time for me. So then you just want to turn off the visibility on that top layer so you don't see those lines. Don't forget to do that because you'll have lines on your model. Okay, so now I can save this out. File, save as. I'm just going to call this test color. And I don't want layers. I like to save in a TIFF format, so I don't want layers. I want to hit save, and then I want none for image compression. Okay. Then I come back in here. I can assign a new material. Let's just do a Lambert for the heck of it. I'm going to assign the color. Just going to give it a file. Image name. Bridge 01 test color. There it is. Open it up. And if I turn on my textured view here, I can see my UVs. So you can see there's that pink all where we had it. There's the blue underneath the bridge and the gray segments. So it works good. Oops, the wrong button. That's okay. Render it out, and there's your bridge. Looks pretty crappy because it's like pink and blue, and it's, you know, a bad texture and all that. But we're gonna go ahead and start taking this into Mudbox and do some real texturing now. You can do your texturing in Photoshop. Some people prefer that. For certain things, it's easier to do it in Photoshop. Usually what I'll do is do it in Mudbox, and then I'll do touch-ups and stuff in Photoshop. What I love about texturing in Mudbox is that you can just paint it right on the surface, and it's really useful, and you can use photo reference as your basis for your textures. It's just all around good. I'm also going to, I might do some normal mapping. I don't know though. This isn't going to probably smooth out good, so because I don't have enough geometry to really smooth it. And I've already done my UV maps, so I don't want to mess those up. So let's go. When you have nothing open here in Mudbox, let's go to File, Open, find your scene, which for me is going to be in here. Okay. Bridge 01 UV. There it is. Open it up. There's my bridge. It looks kind of wonky in Mudbox because Mudbox by default will want to display smooth shade. But if I turn that off, then I get this, you know, with the hard edges. It's just the normals. It's smoothing the normals versus here where it's like no smoothing on the normals. See, if I press Shift D to increase the geometry amount, it changes the shape a lot because I don't have the proper creases in the geometry to make it kind of hold those hard edges. And it also creates some issues in here where I have that messed up geometry that I did on accident. So I'm not going to go ahead and paint a normal map. If I was going to do a normal map, what I would do is just kind of make a high detail version of this. I would paint on like stone. I would sculpt, actually, I should say, like stone materials and stuff onto here, and I could like render that out and everything. But I'll talk about that in another tutorial. For now, we're just going to talk about simple painting textures on here, okay? Don't try and do a whole scene at once. Do one object. Pick an object, load it up in here, and work on it. So we've got our bridge object. You can see this over here in the object list. But what we're going to be working in is the paint tools. So usually if you're in Sculpt Tools, you just click right here, bam, paint tools, okay? The first thing we have to do is click on our mesh. It's going to say, you know, what kind of paint layer do you want? You can give it a name if you want. I'm just going to leave it at paint layer 1. Size. Size is important. I'm going with 2048. I decided that earlier. That's what I want to do. You can choose your format. PNG is fine for certain things. I'm just going to go with a TIFF. And channel. This is what type of texture are you painting on? We're doing a diffuse. We want a color layer. So this is going to be the diffuse channel. You can paint a bump map. You can paint incandescence, gloss, specular, whatever. We'll probably go through and do a bump map. We might do a gloss map, but I probably won't do that because I'll probably do the bump map and then I'll process it again in Photoshop to make a sort of like a reflection map. So we're just going to do diffuse for now. Okay. So let's talk about how we want to go about painting this. First, I like to start with the paintbrush tool. Okay. I'm not going to use a stamp image. I want the color to be gray because this is going to be my base color. Right now, it looks tan, but it's not tan. The texture itself doesn't have any color, so if you were to like save this texture out, it would just be transparent, and you wouldn't be able to see your bridge. So in order to make sure you don't miss any spots or get little transparent holes in your texture, what I like to do is set this strength to 100, and I go down here to flood paint layer. Bam. Now I have a fully gray bridge. Now I know that none of my texture is going to be transparent, and I can just, see here, it's covered everything in this gray. So I can just start painting and know that everything is going to be covered. Now you could just paint this, using different stamps and stencils to create different, color effects. You can hand paint it. What I like to do is get the projection brush and use a projection map to kind of paint texture onto this. So in order to do that, I'm going to go up here to this top part. I'm going to click Image Browser, and I already have chosen a folder, which is my source images for this project, where I have all my textures. So all of those are over here. You can even see our crappy bridge texture there. So what I want to do is I want to select one of these textures. I'm going to go with Stonewall 02 because I'm using this in other things in the project and I want it to match. So here I can kind of preview my image, make sure it's the one I want. If you go up here, there's a couple of options that are important. There's the Set Stamp tool if you wanted to use this image as a stamp. And for our purposes, Set Stencil. So I'm clicking Set Stencil. There's some options over here like visibility, how transparent do you want it to be and stuff. When we go back to our 3D view, you can see our stencil is up. You can turn that on and off by pressing Q. And it shows you some options over here. S plus middle mouse, let's look to move the stencil around. Okay, you can scale the stencil, and you can rotate the stencil. So that's all good stuff. Now, in